legends, Rob Vincent and Kevin Kerr. How are you guys today?
I'm good, thanks, John.
Good, mate. Good to see you.
All right. Well, we are. This is a kind of a special occasion. It's been 5 years since the two of you were teammates. I mean, I obviously played a little bit. I think one game in 2016 together, but really 5 years since you two broke out and had a very, very special season together, and a very unique season. With the club in 2015. And obviously, I wrote about it in my book, Miracle on the Mon, and I just want to thank both of you for contributing so much to it. And you are both graced by the cover.
Yeah.
This is my working copy. I still have Post-it notes and everything in it, but there you guys are. Your teammate Danny Earls. First of all, just kind of what your reaction was to Danny Earls' what he did with this.
Yeah, it's top drawer, to be fair. Obviously, I've not got my copy yet, but if the book's half as good as the front cover, it should be a great read. Pressure's on.
Yeah, your brother ordered your books, and
my dad.
Your dad. I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Your dad. And he ordered it, and so he goes, I'm gonna read it before Kevin does. So oh, really? It's like, okay, all right. I'll give him an excuse. He's a busy guy, got kids, and things like that. So,
looking forward to it.
Well, what did you think of Danny's contribution there?
No, it's unbelievable. I used to remember when we first met back in probably 2014, and I think he kind of had the Instagram maybe up then, and he would do little bits here and there. But no, I mean it's unbelievable. Some of the stuff he does is unbelievable. Probably a better drawer than he was player, to be honest.
We cover the entire facility, which will give you a whole front.
Yeah, and obviously, as when I was doing it, I had to include him as get his takeaways and from the experience of the book from that season, and obviously the Miracle on the Mon game itself.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to read it yet, Rob?
I did not. No, my dad did the same thing. He bought it before me, and he told me all about it. But no, I'm in the same boat as Kevin. I feel like I have so many books right now that I want to read, but I'll get to it eventually, I'm sure. But
all right. No, I'll make sure both of you have copies then. I'm gonna make sure of that. So,
all right.
All right. Well, but that being said, I mean, did you have any reaction from others, and did anybody say anything to you guys about it? I know that I've had quite a bit of reaction, but
yeah, no, my family were basically they all went through it. I think across my family back in England, I think they've probably bought 3 or 4 copies, and they've all, because it was hard for them to truly kind of understand, I guess, the ins and outs. They just see the results, and they talk to me during when it's all going on, but they were just really impressed at kind of the inside info that was kind of contained in the book. And I guess, we don't think about it because we were involved, but, from the outside, you don't see the kind of the ins and outs and the team talks and kind of the little relationships that go on throughout the season. So it's always cool. And, from my perspective as well, just, hearing what other guys were kind of going through that time, at that time of the season. So definitely interesting in that perspective.
Yeah, I would agree, as well as obviously the whole book's not just about the soccer side of it in that game. Obviously where the club had come from, and just a little bit of a success story to a degree. And now I'm saying as Robbie, the thing I'm looking forward to it most is to see what other boys said, Bobby and Danny. Obviously I've spoken to them about it, but I don't know how their meetings with yourself went.
yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Like a lot of I spoke with both of you at length, but I also got a lot of feedback from some interesting people involved. Obviously, Richard Nightingale. Obviously, we had a lot from Mark Steffens and a lot of the people like that, and even just kind of what the club went through, and what you guys were there every step of the way from once Highmark Stadium opened. So there was a lot of interesting things that happened, good and bad, and you guys experienced both of those things. And so there's a lot in there about all of that as well. And, both of you contributed to really helping tell that story. So I really appreciate that. I don't want to go into too much detail about the match itself, because I'd rather people actually read the book, The Miracle on the Mon match. But just any 5 years later, just thoughts on that match, any other things that have come up over the past, actually since this book has come out, in terms of.
I was, when you said about the 5-year anniversary of the playoff clinching game, that for me is the least memorable game of that season, especially against Harrisburg. I had to go back and look what the result was, because I couldn't remember. Obviously, the first 3 games were very high score and very exciting. And I'm sure that final game was exciting for the fans and us at the time, because it was clinching playoffs, but it was 2-1. It was a boring game by the standards we set that year. So yeah, I couldn't even remember the score. I had to go back and watch the highlights this morning. And
that's because you didn't score, Bobby.
I know. I only remember.
I know.
Yeah, I was going, for me, completely different. I loved that game. I remember we played down there, and obviously big pressure game at the time, and obviously we'd had the history with them. And I think, as far as I'm aware, it was one of the biggest away turnouts I've probably ever seen when we played in Harrisburg that day.
Yeah.
And obviously we got off to a flying start, and the last 5 minutes I remember is hanging on. I actually think Callie Brown made 1 or 2 unbelievable saves that essentially got us that
Callie
spot.
Brown.
And obviously you work all year, and there's always talk of at the start of every season of championships, but realistically that year we knew our number one goal was to get into the playoffs. And it came down to literally the last 5 minutes of that game where it was on a knife edge. And, I actually remember that game well, and remember it really fondly.
Well, to Rob's point, though, when I talked to Nick Noble, the keeper for Harrisburg, and Neil Schaefer, and Rob, I think Neil said he runs into you every now and then playing the GPSL or some other things like that. But even he said that he thought that season, that's the one match he forgot. It was just like he just didn't remember that much about it.
Yeah,
it's very interesting, and that tells you how, especially those 2 middle, obviously the Miracle on the Mon, and then the comeback that Harrisburg had to come back and beat you guys. How that was some rivalry that just
No, and like Kevin said, when I went back and watched it all start coming back, and I do remember, the incredible celebrations we had for both the goals, and then at the end of the game, with the fans coming on the field and presenting the trophy and stuff like that for the Keystone Cup. So, like I say, it was a great moment at that time, but yeah, just in terms of the games itself, it was the lowest scoring, and there was certainly some more exciting games that year.
For sure. Those games were just so high scoring, like you said. So but as the season wore down, things got more tense and more defensive, and guys started to play better as a unit and defensively, right? I mean, I know Stefan's alluded to that quite a bit in the book.
Yeah, and I think we felt at that point like we were probably a really well-prepared team to go into the playoffs. Like you say, we were probably a little bit, earlier in the season, we were just all guns blazing, and if we were going to lose, we were going to do it, attacking. And like you say, towards the end of the season, the results did get a little bit tighter, and that probably was nerves and starting to look, towards the end of the season and making sure we were going to be above that line. But yeah, obviously looking a little bit further ahead now, we definitely were. We felt like we were a good team going into the playoffs, and unfortunately it didn't go well. But I thought we grew a lot as that season went on. We were a pretty good team by the end of it.
Yeah, Kevin, talk about that team down the stretch. It just seemed like you guys got better and better defensively.
Yeah, to be fair, there was a lot of room for improvement at the start, but the boys figured it out. We talk about it all the time. We had a brilliant group of players that year. You know, it just took us a while to gel. And, you know, I mentioned him earlier, Cali Brown finding his form and getting into the lineup, I remember did help massively. He came up with a few big performances and played his role in us stop leaking goals. You know, obviously because everyone else in the league was getting better at the time. You know, going into games, you know, they would put a bit more attention on Lebo, Robbie, and myself. People would obviously get wise. Obviously, you had the footage and would get wise to the way we were playing at that time. And yeah, it was, like I say, it was a great achievement to make it, but it's still one of my biggest regrets is that we couldn't go further and go further that year, because I mean it's the reason why we all talk about that year. They just felt like there was a slight turn in the club. There was a lot of positivity. Everyone was happy after coming out of the 2 tough years prior to that, and yeah, that making it was great. But the next week against New York was one of the hardest losses for me.
Absolutely, and you know, I definitely talk about that in the book as well. There's, you know, I said we focus on the game, but then the backstory of everything that led up to the Miracle on the Mond and then after. And so there's definitely a lot. We talk about the leaner years, but one thing that kept going was the rivalry with Harrisburg. You know, and that was something special. We just won't see something like that ever again, I don't think, at least around here. I think we're seeing it'll be the bigger city market clubs. Louisville, maybe Cleveland will have a team someday. You know, we just don't see those closer geographic regional rivalries. I don't think are going to exist. So I think that was pretty special, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was fitting that we played them last. You know, people that weren't involved in those things and didn't play in the Keystone Cup, maybe they palm it off, and that's fair. But for us playing in it each year, you know, it genuinely meant something. You know, and the fans really got involved in it, and you would see that in the way that they would travel to the games. Like I said, in that one game that we're talking about today, that I think that's the biggest away support I witnessed. You know, and that just highlights how much everyone enjoyed those games.
Rob, any thoughts on the rivalry as a whole?
Yeah, I think that season really kind of blew it up. Obviously, I didn't play in any games after that season, but I could always tell after that season, and obviously still following the Riverhounds in the years that followed, there was always much bigger hype going into those games, and there was a lot more riding on it, especially for the fans. Whereas before, you know, we knew they were our rivals. We knew they were an in-state rivals. You didn't want to lose to them. But like I say, just the introduction of the Keystone Cup that year, and which, you know, probably as players at the start of the season, when we heard about the Keystone Cup, it was just kind of, it didn't really change anything for us. But I think once we saw how much the fans were getting into it, that really elevated it for us. And then the way those first few games went, you know, it was always going to be huge after that.
Yeah. And Kevin, you mentioned, you know, the fans and that type of support on the road. You know, in the book, I talk about in the excerpt that we'll be posting on Sunday, Tuffy Schallenberger, you know, for 2 weeks in a row too, because he did it for the following week, you know, made sure he pulled whatever resources he could to get a bus and fans to go to the games and to support the team. I mean, what did it mean to have that type of ownership and support on that end?
Yeah, I mean, the club doesn't seem to be in a great place now, but the fact of the matter is that if he didn't come in when he did and put as much of his time, effort, and his money into the project, you know, I don't know if the club would still be here, you know, and there was from day one, obviously, he's a very passionate man, as he'll show sometimes during the home games. If you're anywhere near his suite, but yeah, it's probably just that passion that kept the place afloat. you know, and his desire to then not only keep the club going, but to push it on and to keep pushing it on like they are now. You know, fair play to him. He deserves all the credit he gets.
Any thoughts on Tuffy, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing the same thing. I mean, it's very clear from the moment he came in. It was very clear that he was incredibly ambitious, and he wanted to make the club as you know, not just financially strong, but he wanted it to be a successful team as well on the field. You know, and I can't talk too much about what he does on a day-to-day basis because I don't know. But just from being involved with the club for several years now, I just know that whatever he can do to help and keep the club moving along in the right direction, he's going to do. And like you say, that year the fact that he was helping fans get to games and stuff like that just shows how much he is a part of the club and wanted the club to keep growing.
Yeah. And in 5 years, everything's come a long way in terms of one of the big changes now is that you probably will never see too many games at that level be played at a place like Harrisburg, especially the field you guys played on there.
Yeah.
It's kind of your thoughts on City Island and what that whole experience was playing against them in the City Island atmosphere. And it was really unique, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I mean, the field was dreadful. I swear on a couple of occasions we would turn up and the lines weren't straight. Like the field was kind of wonky or something, I don't know. But it all added to the experience, you know what I mean? It was, because there was the same for both teams. You could tell that they didn't necessarily enjoy playing on it. They were probably never the prettiest of games. But, it was the same for both teams. And like I say, it was all part of kind of going to Harrisburg. You knew it was going to be a graft. When we played at home, we knew we could get the ball down and play. When we played in Harrisburg, you knew it was going to be a fight. You're going to have to get stuck in, win your loose balls and fight all the way to the end. So no, it was one of those things it was all part of playing Harrisburg away.
Yeah, I'd agree. Do you know what as well? I used to love going to these unique places, especially nowadays as all the new stadiums go up and they're all beautiful but they're all very similar. Do you know what I mean? I really enjoy even your Harrisburg away or your Louisville on the turf field or Nashville in the baseball stadium. There's just something unique. There's something unique about the league, and it's only now that I stopped and I look back, when I look back on it, I look back on it so fondly, just going to these unique places. Like Harrisburg's on this little island in the middle of PA, really unique setting, and I think it's probably why I love Highmark so much, because it's just so unique, and obviously we're probably used to it because we're down there all the time, but just I love those little unique places as opposed to nowadays you look at the MLS or something and they're almost carbon copies of the stadiums. They're just different colors,
Yeah. And Harrisburg, it was always so family friendly as well. I mean, you'd be warming up, there'd be families everywhere walking around, kids, parents. They had the little concession stands where you'd have to walk through kind of the food trucks to get onto the field. Like Kevin says, you do miss little things like that. Miss getting bitten by about 20 mosquitoes during the game.
Because it's right off the water there. Yeah. It was warm, humid nights in the summer. Oh, it was crazy there. Yeah.
But no, they were fun.
And both of you have had, like Kevin was alluding to, you both have had that. I mean, obviously, Rob, in MLS, you had a little bit more experience in that, playing in some other environments that are pretty interesting, lots of fans, things like that. But even Kevin, I mean, there was those last couple of years, like you said, Nashville, Cincinnati was really special. So things have come a long way in 5 years.
Yeah. No, I think
from the Dayton days of my first year, just going to any random high school in Dayton and playing a game. Now, when like you say, we had the years with Cincinnati, and now you have your Indies and your Tampa Bays, and you know, obviously Louisville, I never played in it, but Louisville have built that new stadium, and you know, I think
Beautiful.
there's plenty to be that are in the works to be built around the league, and they're stunning, and it's only going to move those clubs in the league forward. But yeah, I do just love the unique stadiums, and obviously those, as the league moves forward, as it should, those days will start to, the stadiums will start to be a bit different.
Yeah.
Rob, what was in terms of atmosphere for you through your experience with DC United? What was probably the most best experience in terms of atmosphere?
I was just thinking then, I mean, the number of people at a game and the atmosphere are two totally different things.
Yeah.
You know, because some of the best atmospheres I played in weren't necessarily huge numbers, but they were just when the crowd was rocking. And, you know, sometimes it was just that closed in environment. You know, because if you think about it, and it's no disrespect to the club or the fans, but if you'd play in like a Richmond, you know, they would get a few thousand fans, but they were sitting miles away from the stadium, kind of open air, and you could barely hear anything. But then, like I say, you go to Highmark on a playoff night, and it might only be 2,000 or 3,000 fans, but it's rocking. You know, and you know, I have to say, playing in RFK, I was lucky enough to play in an MLS playoff game there where we, you know, probably got about 30,000 in RFK, and that place was bouncing. And so there was, you know, obviously bigger numbers do make a little bit of a difference, but I think finding that right atmosphere was always a lot more fun to play in for me. Compared to Harrisburg, they did that. They created a little bit of an atmosphere. Some clubs have it with their fan bases. And like I say, they were always the best ones to play in. I always remember Orlando in the playoffs in 2013.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the loudest kind of atmospheres that I'd been in to that point. And obviously that was not an enjoyable night in terms of the scoreline, but you know, the fact that Orlando were playing so well at that point, you know, that was probably the loudest environment I'd played in.
Yeah, and obviously both of you, we can go back to that 2015 year and talk about, I think when the seed was really planted here in Pittsburgh was that Open Cup match. I think most people would agree that was the, you know, at least prior to the Bob Lilly era, the one night where everyone seemed to get, and both of you had such huge roles in that game and were part of that. You know, what was it like?
It's such a shame. Before we get into that, it's such a shame that since that night, where the whole city seemed to get behind us, that we haven't been able to get an MLS team at home. It's and obviously that's just luck of the draw and the way it goes. But I would agree with you. I actually think of all the games, maybe last year in the playoff game against Louisville was like a comparable atmosphere. But away from that, it was that DC at home, because it wasn't even just the sellout crowd. It was the whole city seemed to be behind us. You know, the underdog taking on a big team from the MLS, and you know what I mean. And we came so close that day. But yeah, like you say, I felt the same. I felt that the club really gained momentum, and it's just such a shame that we haven't had the opportunity to build off that with the way that the Open Cup draws have been, and we keep getting drawn away.
Rob, your memories of that match?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that, like, I think like Kevin said, just that was one of those Highmark nights where the atmosphere is just unbelievable. It feels like you've kind of definitely got more people in than there are seats in the stadium, and there's, you know, 2 or 3 rows of people standing up around the outside. And, you know, if you look back at photos and videos from that night, it just seems like there's just people watching from all angles. So like I say, those are the nights that you don't need any additional motivation to get involved in the game or whatever. You just feel like you can run forever. Wigan, I always think back to the Wigan game in 13, and you know, you honestly just feel like you can run all night. You never run out of gas. And like Kevin said, you know, the more of those nights we can have, whether it's playoffs, whether it's Open Cup, they always do just give that little boost. And, you know, hopefully we can have more in the future and kind of, playoffs each year will be great, but little Open Cup runs as well, just to keep, pulling those fans in and keep growing the reputation in the city.
And I'm just sitting here listening to all this and talking about it. It's just making me miss, what we had.
I was happily retired until we started at the start.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not the same. So, I've been sitting in the suites in the end and just watching games, and I mean, it's great to watch just to have it back, but it's just not the same. So, yeah, I'm glad that both of you were part of that and were able to bring that, to be a part of that during the last 5 years ago and in the years since. So, but hopefully we'll get back to that in the next year or two. Hopefully not too much longer. But I just want to thank both of you for your time and time with, again, contributing to the book, but also today and all the time. You guys have always just been so gracious, and I appreciate the time that you've given and helping grow the sport here. And now you're doing that with the club at the youth level. So, just again, appreciate everything you guys are doing. And any parting thoughts?
It's a pleasure to help you with this stuff. I think Kevin would agree. I think we always enjoy reminiscing on these enjoyable moments that we've had. That's it's the best way to really keep them fresh, is just to keep reliving them. And I don't think there's a lot of moments from those years that we'd never want to forget. So I enjoy talking about them, and it's like you say, working with the academy now. Hopefully we can continue that little keep moving these young players forward. And I know that the big goal of the academy now is to start seeing more players like Robbie who can go from academy into the pro team. And that's another way that we can really kind of grow the bond between the city and the club.
Yeah, you mentioned Robbie Mertz, who somebody like that, and hopefully there's a lot more to come. A lot more Robbie Mertzes to come. Kevin?
I'm sure there will be.
For me, big man, I obviously, I might have to message my old man right now and get that book sent across after talking about it. But also thanks to yourself as well. How obviously you and a few others in the media have absolutely done your bit to help grow this club. And you know what I mean? Even when things ain't going great, and there's a way to cover it. Sometimes it's easy to smash and criticize, but you've always been great. You're always great for me and Bobby, obviously, but also for the club. And even this book is just going to help the Riverhounds and soccer in Pittsburgh in general. So make sure everyone goes out and buys this book, huh?
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate both of you again. It's been really great. So, but you got to read the book. So hopefully, maybe I'll have to get a hardback edition made for both of you guys or something. So maybe you're waiting for the the most updated version. So make changes and make a hardback. So, but anyway, thanks for your time, both of you, and I look forward to talking to you soon and seeing you guys hopefully soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, mate. Top man.